Nowadays, numerical simulation is an essential tool for scientists and practicing engineers for both analysis and design purposes. Real-life problems, however, are extremely complex. Since a few decades ago, very strong hypotheses were made in order to be able to tackle them. Today, also thanks to the rapid growth of computational capabilities, there is an increasing demand from both the academia and the industry for more and more sophisticated models, in the attempt of reducing the number of simplifying hypotheses. In particular, many problems involve the contemporary presence of different physics. Lots of applications, ranging from biomedical to aerospace engineering, can be modeled within the theory of solid and fluid mechanics. Traditionally, numerical techniques have been developed to solve problems of one kind or the other. Real problems, however, involve often the presence of both solids and fluids. Examples are fluid structure interaction problems, or problems which are at the edge between the solid and fluid behavior, like those arising in recent additive manufacturing processes or advanced welding technique, like the friction stir welding or friction melt bonding. In my thesis, I focused on fluid structure interaction phenomena and in particular on problems involving free surface flows on the fluid side and large solid deformations on the solid side. The treatment of free surface flows can be employed to simulate floods or dam break events in civil engineering, such as those studied experimentally at the hydraulic lab of the University of Liège. In these kind of problems, the presence of the air at the fluid surface can be often neglected, which justifies the term free surface flows. On the other hand, large solid deformations or displacements have to be accounted for to accurately model some aeroelastic phenomena, like instabilities of wings or bridges, or vortex-induced vibrations phenomena. The main objective of my thesis was to develop a computational framework to address this kind of problems in a general and efficient way. The first issue comes with the fact that traditional CFD techniques, based on an Eulerian approach, cannot account for moving boundary easily, especially in the case of large fluid motions, like for closing waves. On the other hand, a Lagrangian approach can take the evolution of the free surface into account naturally. The limitation in this case would be mesh distortion, which can compromise the accuracy of the solution and make the computation fail. The starting point of my work was thus to find a way to employ a Lagrangian formalism, but without incurring mesh distortion issues. I thus turned myself toward the world of meshless methods and selected the particle finite element method, or PFEM, as the best candidates for my purposes. I then implemented this method from scratch in an efficient C++ computer code. The key idea of the PFEM is to discretize the domain with a cloud of points, called particles, that move in a Lagrangian fashion and serve as finite element nodes. The governing equations are then discretized using the well-established finite element theory, which guarantees the robustness and the generality of the approach by ensuring good convergence and stability properties independently of the constitutive model employed. The connectivity between the particles can be rebuilt whenever needed using an efficient remeshing strategy which combines a Delaunay triangulation with a boundary recognition strategy based on alpha shapes, a technique originally developed for computer graphics applications. Alpha shapes allow to capture the position of the free surface simply based on a geometrical criterion. Indeed, particles that are close to each other will lead to small, well-shaped triangles in the Delaunay triangulation, while particles which are far from each other will lead to large or distorted triangles. The bulk of the fluid or isolated clusters of particles can be identified by removing too large or too distorted triangles. The resulting contour coincides with the free surfaces. For instance, simulating the collapse of a water column is easy using PFEM. The exact same problem would be impossible to solve using finite elements. In some problems characterized by high Reynolds numbers, free slip conditions at the fluid walls can be more suitable than no-slip conditions. One of the main contributions of my thesis was to introduce free slip conditions in the context of PFEM. The main idea was to exploit the PFEM remeshing procedure as a contact detection algorithm to identify particles approaching a solid boundary. Once identified, zero normal velocity condition can be imposed on these particles. Thanks to this simple idea, free slip conditions can be applied in a general way for straight or curved, fixed or moving boundaries at a negligible extra cost. My PFAM code has been validated against numerous benchmarks from the literature, both numerical and experimental. One of my favorite is this water sloshing problem. Here, the PFAM solution in blue dots is compared to experimental results obtained by the ETSIN research lab in Madrid. So with the PFAM, I disposed of a good tool to model free surface flows. The next step was to add the structural problem. My work was based on the belief that real-life multiphysics problems can only be tackled by combining the best methods and solvers for each physics. So instead of limiting myself to introduce a solid solver within the PFAM code, I devoted a lot of energy to develop a general, non-intrusive tool that could couple any fluid and solid solver. This effort, conducted together with the multiphysics and turbulent flow computation of the University of Liège, led to development of Cupido, an open-source Python coupler. For instance, Cupido has already been used by other researchers to couple SU2, a finite volume code developed at Stanford University, with GetDP, a general finite element framework developed at the University of Liège. In Cupido, the solvers are coupled iteratively using a Dirichlet-Neumann approach. So first, the velocities of the solid boundary are communicated to the fluid and treated as Dirichlet boundary conditions. Then, the stresses along the interface resulting by the fluid solution are communicated back to the solid and treated as new Neumann boundary conditions. This loop is repeated until convergence. The solvers are treated as black boxes, which means that coupling algorithms can be developed without any knowledge of the coupled solvers and vice versa. This is a capital feature, so we have a general technique that can be used by many others in the future. The coupling algorithms constitute the scientific core of Cupido, and thus consider two simulations, both performed without a coupler. On the one hand, the opening of an elastic gate under the action of pressure of a column of fluid. The fluid here is water, while the solid is made of rubber. On the other hand, the vortex-induced vibration of a cantilevered beam triggered by the presence of a bluff body. In this case, the fluid is air, while the solid can be assimilated to a thin sheet of polystyrene. In both cases, the fluid is simulated with PFAM, while the solid solver is Metaphor, the nonlinear finite element solver developed by the MN12 lab of the University of Liège. The simulation of such different phenomena within the same frameworks requires sophisticated coupling algorithms. In particular, when the solid density is similar to or lower than the fluid one, as it is the case for instance for a ping-pong ball rising into water, some undesired numerical artifacts can appear. These effects are known as added mass instabilities, and if not treated, can corrupt the entire solution. The problem arises because in a partitioned approach, some coupling terms at the fluid-solid interface are filtered out. These terms are negligible only if the fluid is much lighter than the solid or if the solid is very stiff. In my work, I showed that the quasi-Newton inverse least square technique developed by De Grote and co-workers at the University of Ghent can be applied to a wide range of problems to cure these detrimental added mass effects within a fully Lagrangian framework. The key idea is to correct the displacements of the interface by introducing the Jacobian of the solid displacements. In the present approach, however, which shall remain non-intrusive, the Jacobian is not available, since the solvers are treated as black boxes. A suitable surrogate of the Jacobian is thus built by successive approximations throughout the coupling iterations. The techniques developed during my PhD thesis have been applied for the numerical simulation of bird strike events. Bird strike on aircraft engines or wings represents a major threat to flight safety and constitutes one of the most demanding requirements in the design of aeronautical structures. This problem falls within the field of fluid-structure interaction phenomena because the behavior of the bird can be assimilated to a certain extent to the one of a water-air mixture. PFAM has thus been used to simulate the extremely large deformations and even disaggregation of the bird, while Metaphor has been employed to simulate the impacted structure, which also undergoes large deformations. Cupido has been employed for the coupling of the two. Probably the main purpose of a PhD thesis is to bring new perspectives.
My PhD thesis is about extending Marco's work on PFAM from fluids to solids.
In the context of my PhD, I had to perform aeroelastic computation for a large aircraft manufacturer, and I did that developing and using Cupido from Marco.
My work at the University of Liège is to extend Marco's code to mesh refinement and 3D.
So there is plenty of place for new exciting developments in the simulation of fluid structure interaction problems, but I'm happy to know that my work will be carried on by other researchers.